Good morning, Genshin boys and girls, gamers of choice out there. I have something that you need to hear. Don't hit fast forward. I've been building Furina. There's a build guide coming out tomorrow morning, but I needed to make this right now because it's one of Genshin's biggest downsides, and it affects Furina, especially free-to-play Furina players, so much, especially if you're a new player. I'm not going to go into all of her kit details. There's a million videos on the channel about that. But as far as weapon selection goes for this character, it is very small. That's because she's an HP scaling sword user. So think of Yelan, but with swords. And so just like someone like Yelan who scales strictly off of HP, which we're going to be doing on Furina at Constellation Zero, we don't have very many weapons that help us out. We are going to need a little bit of energy recharge in our build, but mainly we're looking for crit chance, crit damage, energy recharge, as well as health burst. And so if you just go through all of these swords, you see a bunch of attack, EM, attack, physical damage. None of these work super well with her kit. And here's the biggest problem. This weapon, the Festering Desire, if you weren't around when Dragonspine came out in patch, what was that, like 1.2? If you didn't play, you don't have this thing, and you're a free-to-play player, you're not going for a signature weapon, my goodness, is this thing, you're going to be sorely missing this. Because this thing basically sort of patches up her build necessities quite easily. Now, Furina, depending on who you ask, is going to have a ton of energy requirement needs. I've seen somewhere into the ridiculous, like 250 plus energy recharge at worst circumstances. That could change. But in a lot of other circumstances with other team members who are Hydra, who have Favonius weapons on, right, who have sacrificial weapons on, such as a Xingqiu, you're going to be able to do and lower the energy requirement somewhere down to like 180, 160, depending on if you're using something like Fischl or not. And this is a big deal, and this is why this weapon is so good for her, because this has energy recharge on it, and the ability on it is insanely good for her too, because Furina's elemental skill is very similar to someone like, say, for instance, Oz from Fischl. Now, Oz is going to show up, do some damage, stay around, leave. Elemental skill for Furina, very similar. 20-second cooldown, 30-second duration. Doesn't work exactly the same. You can't move them back around, but you get the gist of it. It's off-field elemental skill damage, and it's going to be the majority, I was going to say most majority, the majority of the damage that you're going to do. Your burst is going to do a little bit of damage, but outside of that at Constellation Zero, you're not doing any other damage outside of your elemental skill. You're going to do a tiny bit of physical damage when you charge attack. Don't talk about that being damage though until you're C2 or maybe C6. I think they swapped it. So this thing's going to be giving you elemental skill damage 32%, elemental crit 12%, and 45% energy recharge. Now, if you need to get to 160, 170, energy recharge at 45%, that is going to be the majority of the amount of energy recharge that you need. Some builds for some players, you might need in some circumstances to hit that energy requirement necessity to keep that 100% uptime on the elemental burst in energy recharge sands if you don't have an energy recharge weapon. But if you have an energy recharge weapon, then, well, the Festering Desire can basically allow you to wear an HP percent sands instead. And if you're allowed to wear an HP percent sands instead, strictly because you have an energy recharge weapon, those two things, while they're being changed between each other, you can sort of think about how is the Festering Desire affecting your build. And if you think about it this way, well, I don't have to wear an energy recharge sands anymore. I get to wear an HP percent main stat sands. As far as that affecting your damage, the Festering Desire is almost, if you think about it like this, an HP percent weapon that gives you elemental skill damage and elemental skill crit, which is huge for her. This is going to be by far and away the best energy recharge weapon you can put on her that also can help facilitate her main playstyle by buffing up the damage that she does. Yes, you can use something like the Favonius sword. It's going to give you even more energy recharge. You're going to be able to generate some additional particles for even more energy requirement needs for herself or maybe for some other allies. But this isn't giving you elemental skill crit rate where 90+% of your damage comes from. It's not giving you 32% elemental skill damage where 90% of the damage your Furina is coming from. This is huge because both of these buff up the skill that does all of your damage while also helping you get the requirements you need to make your build work at the same time for Constellation Zero. There are going to be some other ones you're going to want to try out for C0. And this is really kind of making the Festering Desire not being on your account a little bit worse because everyone's go-to free-to-play weapon for single-handed sword users is the Harbinger of Dawn. But guess what? Not for Furina, it's not. Why? Well, it's got that crit damage on it. That's cool. We don't care about the low base attack because we're an HP scaler, just like the Festering Desire. That's cool. But our HP has to be above 90% to get this 28% crit rate.
All right, we should be fine.
And Furina, when you're trying to do damage with her, in her DPS form with the elemental skill, drains everyone in the party's HP at a pretty rapid rate. You would have to be above 90%, 100% of the time to get maximum use out of the Harbinger of Dawn. And if Furina's in your backline, that means that you need a healer that can heal your whole party, including Furina in the back, at the same rate that Furina's hitting herself, so you don't lose the Harbinger of Dawn bonus, which you could possibly theoretically do, maybe something like a I have no idea, honestly, but it's going to be impossible. We'll just, you know what? We're just going to say it's not really going to happen all that often because Furina, even if she's in healing mode, she heals the main person out front. She doesn't heal the whole party unless you proc her A1 passive. You need someone in the party to make this weapon work that can out heal the Furina doing damage to herself in the backline, which is very, very difficult because a lot of healers heal frontline first or do the majority of their healing to frontline. So keep that in mind as well. As far as other options, I mean, there's Favonius, Sacrificial, I guess, but Sacrificial's resetting a 20-second cooldown, 30-second duration skill. Doesn't generate a ton of particles when you activate it. A lot of the particles are coming from just the damage, sort of like Oz does when it's doing damage. So if you're looking for a 4-star, 3-star weapon, if you want to know what the best one is that works in every facet of her kit, yeah, it's going to be the Festering Desire. So if you don't have access to this, tough cookies. You better start putting in some support tickets or something because this weapon is going to be really, really, really good for Furina, especially at Constellation 0. Now, if you get the Constellation, it might be 2, it might be 6 now. There's one that's similar to Kazuha where she's able to imbue herself with Hydro and be used in more of a frontline role. If you have access to that, then yes, there's going to be actually more weapons opened up that will be good for her because yes, she has HP scaling and everything. She gets additional HP scaling on her normal and charge attacks from that same constellation, and they do turn into Hydro because she does imbue. Those normal and charge attacks do have attack scaling on them, so something like the Jade Cutter isn't kind of worse anymore. It's nothing's wasted, I want to say. You're going to get that huge crit rate, you're going to get the bonus HP, and instead of this attack bonus being totally wasted on a Furina that's Constellation 0 that never normal or charge attacks outside of changing what stance she's in, as a frontline Furina, this thing becomes pretty darn good because you're going to be able to buff up not just your E damage with the additional crit rate and a little bit of HP there, and also buff up the HP scaling on your now C2/C6, whichever one it is, normal and charge attacks that are now imbued, but you're also going to get a pretty sizable bonus attack off of all that HP that you're stacking. So nothing's wasted on this. Once again, something like the Mist Splitter becomes a lot better because you're able to imbue yourself naturally with an element. You're also able to do damage with your elemental skill and your elemental burst at the same time. So now this thing fully works once you have that constellation. But at Constellation 0, you lack the imbue, so you can't get everything the Mist Splitter or Forge would want to do. Same thing with something like the Black Sword. You're not doing damage with your normal and charge attacks at C0, but you are at C2/C6. Once you have that imbue, you're able to do that. A lot of these weapons get a lot better when you're not at C0. But at C0, the Desire is going to be the king of free-to-play weapons. It's going to be huge because of how well it works with the stat balance that she needs. You're going to be able to get a ton of crit rate on it too because she scales with Ascension crit rate as her scaling stat. 12 more on top of that. That's pretty good. Got the energy recharge. Mwah. Got some elemental skill damage bonus. Well, now if you can't, find a good hydro damage goblet to use on her, now you can use an HP one, and the HP one's going to be a little bit better than it would be with another weapon because this gives damage bonus. So you're losing hydro damage bonus, but now you're gaining elemental skill damage bonus. And so the mathematical formula kind of evens out a little bit more there. You can use whatever goblet you have with the highest tier substats possible on a Festering Desire build. So if you don't have access to this thing, I'm not really sure how much as of right this second you're going to be losing when it comes to damage with Furina or fun with Furina. But I do know that this is something that needs to change in Genshin, which is event weapons that you can't get anymore. And I did love, for instance, as we leave, the fact that you could go and get the Ishin because it's attached to a story quest. Kazuhas. This was awesome that it was in there. We need to be able to add some of these back into Genshin Impact in other ways. I'm sorry that you didn't play the game 3 years ago for the second patch of the game. You shouldn't be punished that you don't have it. And that's going to feel really bad for some players when one of the best weapons that a free-to-play or even a whale that doesn't want our weapon could go for isn't available to them. With that being said, make sure you drop a sub if you ever want to see the channel again, because the algorithm's just going to give you some like random robot voice thing, and I'm out of here. Take care.